Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the creative world. My name is Ryan, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a quick and dirty editing breakdown of the following image. First, I start off by cutting my subject out from the background. As you can see, I've already done that. To do this, I use the pen tool, but choose whatever method works best for you. Let's turn the background image back on again, select the subject layer, and next is frequency separation for skin retouching. On the high frequency layer of my frequency separation, I like to go ahead and use the spot healing tool and clean up any kind of blemishes that there may be in the image. Next, I'll go over to the low frequency separation layer, select the lasso tool with a feathering of about 20 pixels, and I'll zoom in on the skin areas. I'll select around any areas that I think could be evened out a bit and go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And then in this case, I'm going to select a radius of about 13 pixels or so. Go ahead and hit OK. And I'll repeat this process for the rest of the image. Once I have finished all my frequency separation, I go ahead and select all my frequency separation layers and press Ctrl E, which merges all those layers into one singular layer. As you can see, I have lost my subject mask, so go ahead and Control click on the thumbnail of your subject layer that is already cut out, and with your frequency layer still selected, go ahead and add a layer mask, and reapply that mask. Next is dodging and burning. To do this, I use curved layers, one to brighten, and one to darken. With the layer mask selected and using a soft round brush with the opacity, or rather with the flow set to around 27–30%, I go ahead and start dodging and burning my subject. One step I forgot to mention earlier, whenever dodging and burning, I like to select both those dodge and burn layers, right click, and create clipping mask. That way it only affects the subject layer below it and nothing else outside. The next step, of course, is to create the background image. In this case, I'm not doing any kind of 3D work, so we're going to go ahead and use some stock photos that I found on a royalty-free website called pixabay.com. So this is the building texture that I chose to use. Before I position the background image, I'm going to go ahead and cut this building portion out, so I have just that and nothing else. With that active selection, go ahead and add a layer mask and right click the layer mask and apply it. So now I just have this building portion by itself. Now I'm going to turn on the original background image layer, go back to my building texture layer, reduce the opacity to about 50%, and start lining it up with the surface that my subject was standing on before. Let's turn off the background image, turn the opacity of that building texture layer back up to 100%, and just like that, we have the building in place of where it needs to be, looking good. Now we're just going to change it up a bit so it matches the colors and lighting of the image a bit better. So first things first, I'm going to darken this building texture down a little bit. So with that building layer selected, go down to your adjustment layers and add a levels adjustment and clip that layer to the building. Mess with a few of these sliders until we have a good starting point. Something like that looks pretty good. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of weathering to this. And here I have a grungy texture from a website called polygon.com. You can find a lot of these online for free. Drag that in. Line it up, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, right click that layer, and again, make sure it is clipped to the layer below it. Now let's just change the blending mode of that layer to multiply. Next, I'm going to add in a little bit of shadow to where my subject's foot is overhanging the ledge a little bit. To do this, above the concrete layers, I'm going to go ahead and add an adjustment layer, levels adjustment, and let's just turn the brightness down quite a bit. Go ahead and invert that layer mask. Go ahead and select the brush tool. Now with white selected, make sure you're painting on the layer mask of that adjustment layer, and go ahead and just paint in part of the shadow. Next, I'm going to bring in a sky texture to finish off my background image. Let's go ahead and bring that behind all of our subject layers. And as you can see here, one thing I forgot to do is to clip the subject shadow layer to the ground below it. Let's go ahead and make sure we do that. And after scaling in the clouds, you can see things look a little off. And that is because that we lit our subject with something that was almost pure white, whereas our clouds are clearly underexposed in comparison. So to fix this, let's go ahead and get a starting point of a brighter image. So with the clouds layer selected, go ahead and add an adjustment layer, levels, clip it, and brighten the image a bit. Now we are going to adjust the hue of the background image clouds just so it more closely resembles the lighting that we use to light our subject. As you can see here, the blue light that I chose to light my subject was a little more of a cyan, whereas the background image is a bit more natural blue. So let's go ahead and add a color balance adjustment layer and clip it. And I think with the midtones, let's just add in a little more cyan. Now at this point, you want to keep in mind your camera settings. I shot this image at f5, which means the background behind it is going to be not completely blurred out, but it's not going to be completely sharp either. Whereas these clouds are completely sharp. So I'm going to go to my clouds layer, and let's convert this layer to a smart object by right-clicking the layer and convert to smart object. And this just means that when we add any filters to it, we can go back and adjust those filters later in case we decide we want to make a change. Now go up to filter, blur, and let's go with Gaussian blur again. Yeah, 5 looks good. So we have all of our background elements in place. The next step is adding what I like to call atmospherics. These are elements such as fog, smoke, lens flares, bloom, dust particles, and other elements of that nature. So first I created a new layer in between the background building and clouds. Set the blending mode of that layer to screen. Then I used a large soft round brush with a low flow and sampled the color from the background and then painted behind my subject a bit. And if I toggle this off and on, you can see that I further brightened the background image while still maintaining a little bit more of the blue color. I repeated this process again for a layer on top of everything. Next, I'm bringing in a stock image of some dust particles. Set the blending mode of this layer to screen. I now added a layer mask and erased away parts of this that were covering my subject. At this point, I've added everything that I want to add to this image, and now I move on to the sharpening and color toning phase. With the top layer selected, I'll hold Ctrl, Alt, Shift, and press E, which merges all visible layers into a new layer on top. Set the blending mode of that layer to overlay, go up to filter, other, high pass filter, and I just select a radius that yields the sharpening that I like. Next, I again merge all visible layers onto a new layer on top, go up to filter, camera raw, and here I've loaded up a preset that I made that has various adjustments that I tend to add to most of my images. The changes you'll see here are various levels adjustments, curves adjustments, as well as adding film grain. And the final step for color toning is adding a color lookup adjustment layer and setting the blending mode of that layer to color. The reason I do this is because whatever light I load in, I don't want it to affect the levels of my image as I already have it to where I want it to be. I only want it to affect the color of my image. So I'm going to go here and start loading up different LUTs and cycling through to see which one I like. And just like that, I'm done with the image. Guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, maybe give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing. By the way, if you want a more in-depth look into my editing process, including getting your hands on a Photoshop document, consider joining my Patreon. Link in the description below. And until next time, stay creative.